The British monarchy just suffered a catastrophic public meltdown. The chapel had been dead silent only seconds earlier, but one entrance shattered the calm with the force of a bomb. Catherine, Princess of Wales, was already securely seated inside St. George's Chapel when Meghan Markle stepped inside, locked eyes, and began moving directly toward the exact same royal pew. What happened next wasn't a breach of protocol. It was a cold, calculated execution of a boundary. Catherine rose to her feet without uttering a single syllable, completely ignored Meghan's presence, turned her back on the entire service, and walked straight toward the chapel doors. No screaming argument, no frantic palace explanation, just one devastating physical gesture that instantly transformed a private royal gathering into a completely unhinged family crisis. Before we rip open the classified reality of what this actually means, make sure you subscribe to Regalvora right now so you don't miss a single second of this royal warfare. Catherine did not hesitate for a fraction of a second once she was on her feet. This private service at Windsor Castle was supposed to bring senior members of the royal family together after months of toxic tension between the Sussexes and working royals. That tension was a loaded gun. When Meghan confidently approached the seating area reserved for Catherine's inner circle, the Princess of Wales made her choice. She would rather physically abandon the service than share oxygen beside her. William watched the movement unfold with absolute disbelief. His wife reached the end of the pew, placed one hand against the rail, and shot him a look that lasted barely a second. He understood. This wasn't a seating mix-up. She had reached a psychological boundary she was permanently unwilling to cross. The Prince of Wales remained frozen, his jaw tight, watching his wife walk out. Catherine had spent years swallowing private rage, refusing to let it bleed into the ceremonial spotlight. Now, that legendary restraint had completely snapped in front of everyone. Meghan was left completely paralyzed as Catherine vanished toward the heavy oak doors. She had marched in expecting to take her spot and force everyone to choke down the discomfort. Instead, the sudden departure left her standing completely alone, facing something vastly more lethal than cold politeness. For several agonizing seconds, Meghan was trapped in no man's land. Harry saw the hesitation, but she stood there long enough for the suffocating silence to choke the entire room. King Charles felt the atmosphere collapse before a single word was spoken. A senior aide sprinted after Catherine, signaling to everyone that palace staff knew this was a massive crisis. To understand why one step into a wooden pew triggered such a radioactive response, you have to look away from the chapel doors. This was never about a chair. The truth is, Catherine had explicitly warned Meghan weeks ago. During a brutally tense private sit-down, Meghan demanded they sit together for the cameras to fake a healed family dynamic. Catherine stared her down and ordered her not to force a public PR stunt out of a relationship privately in ashes. Meghan ignored the strict warning, marched into the pew, and thought she could force Catherine's hand. She thought wrong. Catherine completely blew up the charade. The heavy chapel doors slammed shut behind Catherine, but the brutal conflict did not stay contained for long. Within minutes, Meghan broke rank and followed her out, transforming a silent withdrawal into the explosive confrontation everyone at the palace had deeply feared. There were no courtiers standing between them now, no sacred service to hide behind, no carefully manufactured PR statements waiting to rescue the moment. Catherine had walked away to completely avoid a spectacle, but Meghan followed her because walking away had become the ultimate spectacle. Catherine stood in the adjoining private chamber, desperately trying to steady her breathing. William had deliberately stayed inside the chapel just long enough to stop the entire royal service from descending into complete chaos, knowing that sprinting after his wife immediately would make the total rupture look even larger. Meghan had barely stayed inside the chapel. She turned to Harry, told him she needed to confront Catherine directly, and went straight for the kill. She burst into the private room, stopped dead near the door, and instantly launched her attack. She aggressively demanded to know why Catherine had deliberately humiliated her in front of the entire royal family. Catherine didn't flinch. She placed both hands firmly against the back of a chair, absolutely refusing to sit down, and fired back with lethal precision. Humiliation was never the goal. Catherine explicitly reminded Meghan that the strict boundary they had brutally argued over weeks earlier had been completely ignored. Remaining in that pew would have forced Catherine to participate in a fake, manufactured public message of unity that she was absolutely unwilling to send. Meghan instantly pushed back, fighting tooth and nail. She claimed the seating maneuver was meant as an olive branch, not psychological warfare. She argued that sitting together would prove to the world that the family could actually move forward. But Catherine cut her off at the knees. She told Meghan straight to her face that forcing public symbolism without an ounce of private trust didn't feel like reconciliation at all. It felt like being held hostage and forced to pretend. Every single time either woman weaponized the word trust, the air in the room grew sharper and more toxic. But then, Meghan dropped a massive bombshell that Catherine never saw coming. Meghan revealed that King Charles himself had explicitly encouraged the idea of the two couples appearing visibly united during the service. The king's grand master plan, as Meghan understood it, was to force the family to stand together despite the absolute carnage that had torn them apart. Meghan took that royal mandate literally. Catherine had never heard a word of it. Catherine's furious anger didn't vanish, but the entire battlefield instantly shifted. For the first time, she realized Meghan might not have aggressively stormed the pew just to challenge her private warning. If King Charles was secretly handing out conflicting instructions behind closed doors, this disaster had been rapidly building long before anyone stepped foot inside the chapel. That single realization changed the absolute target of their fury. King Charles desperately wanted one picture-perfect morning of manufactured unity. Instead, his reckless attempt to force the family physically closer violently exposed exactly how emotionally shattered they truly were. By the time the reigning monarch learned what had exploded outside the chapel doors, it was no longer a petty question of royal etiquette. Two furious wives firmly believed they had been deliberately shoved into an impossible, humiliating trap. Two highly protective brothers, Prince William and Prince Harry, were now actively preparing to defend their spouses at absolute all costs. King Charles was finally forced to face the brutal, undeniable truth. His desperate, heavy-handed plan for a fake PR reconciliation had completely detonated the royal family from the inside out. By late afternoon, the explosive anger had cooled just enough for something far more dangerous to emerge inside Windsor Castle: brutal honesty. William delivered a harsh reality check to Catherine, warning her there was only one way to stop this nightmare from becoming a permanent war. She and Meghan had to speak again. No husbands, no panicked aides. The palace PR machine could rearrange schedules all day, but they could never repair shattered trust. Catherine entered the isolated sitting room first, choosing a chair disconnected from formal royal seating. Meghan arrived moments later and firmly closed the door. They weren't there to solve years of vicious conflict. They were there to dissect the chapel disaster and the crippling fear that caused it. Catherine fired the first shot, completely dropping her guard. She bluntly admitted that walking out of the chapel wasn't a calculated attack. It was an act of desperate self-protection. Staying beside Meghan would have created a false image she was emotionally disgusted by. She was terrified that a single photograph of them sitting closely together would be immediately weaponized as proof that all the bad blood was magically forgiven. Catherine refused to let royal ceremony speak for feelings she did not possess. Meghan answered with equal, cutthroat restraint. She admitted that aggressively taking that pew came from the exact opposite fear. She firmly believed that refusing the king's implied gesture of unity would be instantly branded as toxic hostility toward the family. Meghan felt trapped, labeled as distant if she stayed away, or manipulative if she moved closer. For the first time, Catherine didn't hear a hostile challenge. She heard a desperate attempt to avoid public execution. Both women had pulled the trigger because they were terrified of being misrepresented. Catherine's aggressive move to avoid a fake reconciliation made Meghan feel publicly humiliated. Meghan's move to avoid looking hostile made Catherine feel ambushed. Both had accidentally created the exact catastrophic misunderstanding they were frantically trying to escape. Catherine finally broke the silence, moved closer to Meghan, and laid down the ultimate law. They had to stop allowing royal ceremony to speak for them. Private trust had to come before any public symbolism. Meghan accepted the brutal truth. They hammered out a strict private ceasefire. But their secret truce came way too late to stop the global bleeding. Outside Windsor Castle, Catherine's walkout was mutating into a monstrous scandal. By evening, one single image completely swallowed every logical explanation. Catherine leaving Windsor while Meghan remained behind. The ruthless media didn't care about King Charles's botched instructions. They only saw a vicious, undeniable departure. Broadcasters instantly turned seconds of physical movement into a savage national verdict. Palace aides panicked, choosing dead silence, terrified that exposing the argument would ignite a constitutional crisis. The world demanded a winner, and the royals were bleeding out. Windsor completely shattered the toxic illusion that appearances alone could fix this broken monarchy. Royal watchers, who was actually in the right during this explosive chapel showdown, Catherine for protecting her boundaries, or Meghan for trying to follow the king's orders? Drop your absolute unfiltered verdict in the comments right now. Hit that like button, subscribe to Crown Watch immediately, and share this video before the palace tries to bury it. Stay locked on Crown Watch because the royal family is at war, and we are exposing every single secret they desperately want hidden.